Mike. All right. Thank you for coming to the last session of the day. Almost the last session probably of the week. Y'all have a huge party to go to, right? So, my name's Ned Pyle. I'm a program manager in Windows Server, and I encourage you during this session to laugh out loud, cheer, applaud, enjoy yourselves, embarrass yourselves. I will attempt to be funny, and I will definitely not be boring, and we will go through Storage Replica, which is a brand new feature in Server 2016. Who here has not heard of Storage Replica? All right, because it's right there. Okay. Why do we make Storage Replica? For disasters. I don't know what I'm saying about Michael Bay right there. Is this film a disaster? Or is this film about disasters? I don't know if you saw like Transformers 4 or 5 or 9. This is our mascot, Jake. And if you stay to the end of this presentation, you come up here, I will give you a laptop sticker with Jake on it you can take home and give to your kids or use for your own delights. He's not King Kong. King Kong is trademarked by Universal Pictures. It's just a gigantic gorilla rampaging through a city. It's not King Kong. Okay, what's a real disaster? Hurricane Sandy happened 4 years ago, almost this week. About a week from now it would have happened. Here's how I drive myself to the Battery from Manhattan, day before, day after. So that's gonna take a bit. I will take the subway. No. Well, all the trains have all of their equipment who are underwater, and that's electrical, so that's not gonna work for a while. And it wouldn't matter because the trains are underwater. That's the Cranberry Street subway tunnel. There's the Midtown Queens tunnel. No one's coming into the office. And more importantly, where do we tend to put cables? In the underground. So all those cables and all that power was gone, and the only way your data center worked is if you knew the right guy at FEMA. And plenty of the data centers that operated in the Zone A and the flood zones, they were offline for weeks. Colo facilities, corporate data centers, they were just gone for weeks. They might have had a little bit of battery and a little bit of generator, and that dried up real quick because nobody expected it to not have any power or infrastructure for weeks in Manhattan, you know, the biggest city in America with the biggest infrastructure, but it happened. And that's really why we made Storage Replica. We want to give you a way out to protect your workloads. How big did this storm get? Anybody know? Anybody ever look at the satellite maps? That's pretty big. Here's us. There's New York. That's a long way. I am inclusive of all people. I believe in diversity. Okay. SR is here to help you through these kinds of problems, okay? And that's all it's here to do. Help you withstand and prevent disasters. I say disaster recovery is one thing, right? Okay, we had a disaster and we got back and we didn't lose any data. I'm here to also prevent it. We're replicating all our data somewhere else. Giant hurricane coming. Well, we'll be failover out of the way of that hurricane and run from the other location. Those are the options I want to give you. I give you synchronous or asynchronous replication. And that means so between a floor of a building, or between buildings, or across or between campuses, across cities, between continents, I don't care. We'll stretch it all the way. I have one customer who goes from Malaysia to London on a stretch cluster, asynchronous. It is storage agnostic. It is block level. So I don't care what your storage is. We'll talk more about that in details in a sec. And I don't care if you're using files or if your files are in use or what a file is. I don't know what a file is. I don't know what a volume is. I don't know what a file system is. I'm a block level replication engine. We use SMB3 as our transport, the same way that live migration and storage spaces direct and scale out file server and all these technologies use SMB3. That's the go-to protocol. And I can guarantee you will not lose data. So 0 RPO for the first time in the history of Windows Server, 0 RPO. Okay, now people are gonna have questions. A, it's really hard to see if you raise your hand, and B, I can barely hear anything over this aircraft hangar we're in. So if you have a question, I'll have breaks and you can sort of jump up and really wave your arms around and there's mics, or you can just shout to me and someone will relay it and I'll repeat it so we can all hear it, okay? So just hold for those breaks. I have a marker for you. Microsoft Marketing, who's all throughout here, he might even be in here right now, have this huge book of branding. And they want you to use that book to keep a consistent theme and make sure that we all here in the audience understand that Microsoft is a very young, millennial-oriented company. Because everybody in here is a millennial, right? Besides you, Mark. So look for my special markers. When you see a guy like this, it's time to ask questions about his choices in life. Okay. I have a lot of demos. I'm a big believer in demos. We're just going to start cranking through demos. If you've been to my earlier session here, some of these will start looking a little familiar, but trust me, just bear with me. We'll get through it and get into a lot of the deeper stuff. Okay? So let's just start with the stretch cluster. Oh, and I have a graphics guy I keep on retainer for my demos. So here's Seattle, and here's Bellevue, Washington, and they're separated by Lake Washington. Okay? Lake Washington, and then there's some kind of a under lake cable or floating on the lake cable where we have a network. And I have cluster nodes in Seattle running VMs, and I have cluster nodes in Bellevue, which is the nearest big city over, running VMs. And this stretch cluster is replicated by Storage Replica. But I'm not going to do the whole thing with cartoons. Here's the actual stretch cluster. It's a 3-node Dell R630 cluster, and one of the nodes is turned off right now for maintenance. And on that cluster, I have how many nano VMs? One node right now. Let's scroll. 500 nano VMs. I still have 30 gig of RAM left over because those little babies don't use anything. I almost said another word besides baby. I may occasionally swear by mistake. Just don't hold it against me on the survey. You can see these things are actually running. I'm logged in. There's all the glory of Nano. You can log in and then just log out because you can't do crap on them. And here's my stretch cluster. You can see I got some 10 terabytes of storage I've carved out of some JBODs, some Dell MD3060s. And you can see I'm synchronously replicating. We call it continuously replicating there to make it a little bit easier to understand. You can see how little storage I'm actually using because those nano VMs, again, don't do anything. Include occupy space. And I also have a SQL database running inside of like a real VM. Here it is. And all it does is create your worst nightmare. It creates endless NEDs, hundreds of thousands of NEDs. So it's running, creating endless NEDs, and then the most likely Michael Bay scenario occurs. Giant gorilla attack, no Space Needle. He starts knocking things over. Seattle's on fire. My servers tip over and are crushed. And I'm really big in huge trouble, right? Not really. What really actually happens in most cases is not a giant disaster of a gorilla. It's usually the idiot donkey you work with, like Phil Moss here from Accutech. There he is. And so when I told Phil to turn on the server that was on maintenance, because he's my idiot donkey who I can't fire because his father runs Ecutech, he turned off the other server. He cut the power even. What actually happened, though, is nothing. I was synchronously replicating every single block between the sites. It was replicating to Bellevue. Every single I/O that had happened on both sites simultaneously in order to complete. So my SQL server's fine. If I log back into it, there won't be any errors, there won't be any problems, there won't be any transactions missing. The endless, giant, beautiful list of Ned rows will continue to exist. They're all there. And my nano VMs will be there, and everything's going to be fine. And this all happened at 3 in the morning, and the only reason I even know about it is because I got some monitoring solution to tell me, because the users didn't know. Everything failed over. Nobody lost any data. There might have been a service interruption temporarily while I spun the VMs back up, but I had these set with VM start priority, which is new in 2016, dependencies, so I started up the ones I needed first, like my SQL database, and then I started my nano VMs up for run ASP.NET and IIS, and as far as everybody knew, nothing happened. And if I put the power back on and finish firing Phil, my nodes join back to the cluster and I'm back in business. 0 data loss. And that is included in Windows Server 2016. Awesome. Okay, so that was a stretch cluster. That's a single cluster that I can just spread across physical sites. And it just acts like a normal cluster the whole time. It has automatic failover. It has site awareness. You can specify, I like this site more than that site. I want these VMs to stay in this site more than that site, or my SQL databases, or my file shares, or whatever. It's a normal cluster. It uses asymmetric storage, and you manage it with Cluster Manager or PowerShell. You don't need to learn anything new about managing clusters. The only new part is setting up the replication, and I'll show you that in a minute. It's not hard. Then, if that's not good enough, you can do cluster to cluster. So let's say I really want to manage this thing and not have automatic failover, or I want to use storage space as direct clusters. I can spread those out. This is obviously going to be asynchronous. Tie them together and replicate between them. I can do manual or orchestrated failover. I support any kind of disk you can imagine. And I can manage it with Azure Site Recovery. That's coming into preview sometime shortly after GA, okay? And then, if that's not good enough, or if you're like a cheapskate, like Phil, you can do server to server. So you don't care about clusters, or you have workloads that don't need to be clustered, but you're still worried about, having them online after a disaster, not having to restore some tape. Server to server, 2 separate servers, wherever you like, manual failover again. You can also even do server to self, which sounds moronic, but it's not. Because you can do server to self to move data between 2 disparate storage arrays, for example, maybe made by 2 different manufacturers. Use it for data migration. I'll show you some numbers on that in a little bit that will definitely blow your hair back. And I could manage it with PowerShell, or maybe, and this is you getting to hear this for the first time ever in history, I can manage it with the Server Manager tool. Have you all heard of the Server Management tool? It just came out. We've been showing it off, but you haven't seen it doing anything but managing a server, and you look at the event log and everybody waves. Here it is, managing storage replica. No PowerShell needed. Add a source, specify some data, specify a volume, specify a log. Add more than one volume here if you like. Build together groups of data to replicate. This will look exactly like an Azure portal because it is an Azure portal. This runs in the Server Manager tool, which runs in Azure for free. So you get your subscription, you get access to this, you put a little gateway service on premises, you point it to all your servers, and now you are managing storage replica with a GUI or from your phone. And what I've done for you is basically said you're going to be working on vacation all the time. Sorry, very sorry. You will have no excuse. Tell you what, you get you a Windows phone, And it probably won't load the web page. You can use that for your excuse. Oh, this is being recorded, I forgot. Don't tell Terry Myerson that I said that. Okay. And you can look at all kinds of aspects. You get I/O characteristics, you get a dashboard, you can change replication direction. It is honestly a little bit easier to use than the failover cluster manager if I don't say so myself. Okay. This will come into preview very, very soon. Obviously, it's looking pretty good, like it works, right? Because it does work, because it's almost done. And the nice thing about being in an Ibiza Azure portal mode is we can release it and update it again, and you don't have to install anything. So you don't get under that RSAT grind. Okay. And after all, I mean, this whole thing, right? Server Manager tool was designed so we wouldn't necessarily have to use PowerShell for everything, Jeffrey. Server to server, cluster to cluster, it is fully integrated. And if you want to see that preview, just watch our blog or just watch NerdPile. I'll announce it at some point. Again, Jeffrey, this PowerShell. You know why you can't trust Jeffrey Snover? Because you get on an elevator with him, and you see that he's got gloves for feet. You can't trust your infrastructure with a man like that. All right. Hopefully Jeffrey does not watch this recording. We're on the same floor. He will now, okay. We replicate blocks, not files, okay? So this is not DFSR. This is not some new version of DFSR. A lot of you know that I'm the PM of DFSR, but this has nothing to do with it, okay? So we replicate blocks under CSV, under NTFS, under REFS. Technically, I don't know what your file system is. If you want to put ZFS or EXT on there, I mean, knock yourself out. I won't know. Probably shouldn't tell me, but I won't know. I don't care about your files. If they're in use, I don't know, and I don't care. I don't know what files are. I only care about you writing I/O. I don't care about you reading I/O. I don't affect reads. I don't make reads slow or fast. I do nothing with reads. All I care about is writing. Where am I in all this giant mess that we call Windows? Well, if you look at a stack with a couple of servers on a couple of sites, way up there, you got SMB at the top, and all the way sort of at the bottom, you got the volume manager. In between is everything ever in the history of volumes, right? And BitLocker and dedupe and VolSnap and blah, blah, blah. So that's all the volume stuff. There's me. And on the other side is a dismounted volume. You can still see it, and the drive letters are there, and the mount point is there, but it's no longer accessible. We take the volume offline, we send blocks to it. And that's for our protection and for yours. You don't want people writing data to something, and we don't want people writing data to something while we change the blocks underneath it, and the file system gets real angry if you do that. So there I am down here, really right around the storage itself, not up there. It's not some file system filter driver, anything like that. Okay. So how does this thing work? You have applications. They write to a source server. They're headed towards the D drive, let's say. Okay, I want to write to the D drive. Here's my I/O for the D drive. Actually, that I/O is going to be simultaneously sent A into the local log and B into a remote log. And that acknowledgement is going to come back up, and if it wrote in both spots, the I/O comes back to the app, and as far as he's concerned, it wrote to the D drive. And the actual D drive there will get this thing shortly thereafter, and I mean very shortly, like nanosecond shortly, through destaging. So this whole thing is hardened to the log and written through to the log. We force unit access to make sure that it actually reaches the storage of the log. So if anything happens in the meantime, the I/O is kept. You lose power, it's kept, doesn't matter. Here's the limits of my PowerPoint animation skills. There you go, there's an I/O. And then there's the D stage. It's fancy. If you do this asynchronously, the only difference is I don't care about the destination server. We will get to it when we get to it. If the network is slow, we'll get there. If it's really latent, we'll get there. If it's offline for a little while and comes back, we'll get there. Now, if it's offline and deceased, your next question is, well, what happens to the synchronous? Let's talk about that. I'm replicating normally. boop, 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 replicating. Then something happens. Network goes down, destination goes down, something like that. It's down. All my I/O continues to happen, your application continues to work, and we continue to accumulate all that I/O into our log. So nothing happens really. And then if you put that network back together, bring that server back up, we replay the log file delta, zip, and then we're back to normally replicating. And it's fast because the log replicating between each other and talking to each other is fast. Now let's say you went for a long time, like weeks, and the logs have wrapped because our log is set to a specific size, and I'll talk about that in a second. You can either let it be the default, or you can use a tool to set it to a much larger or smaller size, or you can do whatever you like. But if it wraps, then we say, aha, I can't use this log anymore. What I'll do instead is I'll use this thing called the bitmap. The bitmap is another little log that we tuck away and hide amongst the real logs, and it just keeps track of changed blocks. It doesn't actually know what changed, it just knows that they changed. And he's got some clever math and a clever size so that if you're worried about the size of that file, 1 petabyte of data would equal a 256 megabyte total bitmap, like the whole thing. So don't worry about it growing out of control. We play that, which is not as fast, but still faster than us actually copying all the data, because if that bitmap didn't work, which would be a bug, we'll just play back the whole darn thing anyway. So the bigger the log, the faster we recover. And we never stop you from writing I/O. That's the key thing to remember. Okay, now, that's a lot of intro stuff. Let me do a quick pause for questions. Any questions yet? Yes, sir, over there. Should the log be on the separate disk? Yes. I will come to that shortly, but we will give you some advice about placing the logs. Obviously, the faster the log is, the faster your I/O is now, because as you can tell from that diagram, your data volume no longer matters. He's just there to answer reads and to accumulate the actual data eventually. The log is where all the I/O is going, and we want him to be as fast as possible, especially now that we've added a whole network in the middle, wasting everybody's time while data moves around on it. Another question? Yes. Is there going to be replication from a server to a cluster? Or, because you saw I didn't have that on there, right? Oops. No, not right now. It's blocked, but it's not blocked for technical reasons. It's blocked because we didn't have time to test that scenario to our satisfaction. Technically, you can create a single node cluster right now. This is a dumb answer, right? And then create a regular cluster, and then I answered your problem, but that's really stupid. So we will, in the near future, unblock that scenario and get you in business. Okay. I'm going to keep on trucking here. And this one, actually, if anybody knows Dean Wells from the Shielded VM team, and he used to be AD MVP. I think this, yeah. He does not like that slide. He really does not like that slide. He likes making fun of people. He does not so much like being made fun of, the Dean Wells. Okay. Let's talk requirements. That's the only sound I have in this presentation. That's public domain. You can use the Wilhelm scream all you want. Obviously, I need Data Center Edition, but I don't care which installation mode you do. So even Nano works great. As where's Charbel over there? Come ask him about if it works on Nano. He will say yes. We were just talking about it. You need Active Directory, but really you just need Kerberos. I don't need you to extend your schema or raise your functional levels or any of that nonsense. I just need Kerberos. And between you and me, I'm working on not even needing Kerberos soon. I need 2 gig of RAM and 2 cores at least. And if you don't have that, get the F out. I need your network for synchronous replication to be low latency. To me, low latency is 5 milliseconds. To some customers, it's less than 1 millisecond. To some customers, it's less than 10. So I had to just pick a number out of my hat, and that number is 5 milliseconds, okay? I need you to initialize your drives as GPT, not MBR. And if you knew what MBR was doing, you wouldn't have been doing that all this time, because it is poo. So I need storage spaces direct, or spaces, or SCSI, or SATA, or iSCSI, or SANLUN. Basically, I don't care what your storage is, which is good, right? I just don't want any removable devices. You're not going to be synchronously replicating floppy drive anytime soon. And I can't replicate your Windows drive, and this is because we block it right now as a scenario. There's nothing stopping us from doing it, and we might change that someday. It'd be great for VMs. I need your disk geometry to be the same. What does that mean? If I have a 512E disk and a 4K disk, well, you better pick one. I can't use both because the blocks will never line up. The cool thing, though, is if you use modern Windows storage pools, like storage spaces, they logically and virtually make everything into 4K. And I'll work then. Good. I need some free space for the logs. We'll talk about that in a sec. I don't really need that much. And I need you to open up that firewall for SMB, which it probably already is. We use a standard transport. It's not some crazy, weird, made-up ports that we've used, and you're already in business. Okay. What do I mean by SMB if you don't know? 3.11, besides owning storage Replica, I also own SMB, so if you want to chat about it after this, that's okay. I get multi-channel for free. I get SMB direct, RDMA support. Now, if I'm doing synchronous replication, I want all the latency removing I can get and all the bandwidth I can handle, right? If I'm doing a lot of I/O, I really want to have a network that can handle it. And SMB direct and RDMA is that network. This is some Chelsio connected devices. The QSFP adapters with fiber in them. This is Mellanox's Metro X long haul solution. This is actually InfiniBand. You can also use Rocky V2. This is a 25-kilometer network. We actually put these things up there and test them on real networks. Don't tell the fire marshal that's on top of the rack. There you get a good idea of the scale. 25 kilometers is the size of Ned's head. There is an 80-kilometer network that we're testing with Mellanox. It is approximately twice the size of Ned's head. Also, you may get some indications that marijuana is legal in Washington state. I'm not actually high in the picture. This is being recorded. Okay, so we test with real networks. We don't do synthetic stuff. We really run this stuff the real way. And then we have 30 production customers right now since October 2014 who've been using these in production ever since, almost 2 years. We are very confident in this feature. And you can come talk to them. Some of the TAP customers are around. You can come talk to Dell, come talk to Data On, talk to those guys. They have real customers really doing this stuff. Okay, now, how do I make this easier to set up? Usually when somebody says, here are the requirements, you say like, oh great, another TechNet white paper to read. But I don't like TechNet white papers. I don't like reading them, I don't like writing them. So here is a commandlet that will test everything I just said and give you all the advice you need. It checks the requirements, it estimates everything, gives you advice. It even kicks out in a nice HTML report, not some PowerShell console window. And if you don't believe me, here it is. So I run this little commandlet. I specify stuff that I want to go replicate. I'm not replicating anything yet. I don't actually have replication installed yet. I just have the management tools installed. And I specify this source and this destination and these volumes, and I say run for this amount of time. So I could say run for 8 hours, and I'll figure out what the behaviors of the server are during the course of the day. Or I could say run for 2 minutes and just give me like a quick, napkin math estimate of what's going on. I compress time here, obviously. And when it's done, he kicks out this little HTML file, which you can open right up. Did anybody notice that Edge browser went away in Server 2016 right at the last minute? It's back to Internet Explorer. That's messed up. But here's my report. Everything that I told you had to meet requirements, who cares? Run this thing. It'll tell you if it don't. Look, right there, I was blocking ICMP, so I can't estimate the bandwidth and latency. Okay, I'll go fix that. Thank you, report. How long is it going to take to do initial sync? Exactly that long. We do a synthetic copy. We make a little 100 megabyte file. We send data to it. We figure out how long it'll take to do that times what your actual volume size would be. We're usually right within about 5%. How big should your log be based on the I/O you do? I don't want to run perf counters. Nobody wants to run perf counters. The perf guys don't want to run perf counters. So it'll take care of all that for me. It'll just monitor what's ever happening and tell me what I need to do and if I meet the requirements or not. And if I fix that requirement test, I don't have to go back and test everything else. I can just say, just tell me if I pass the requirements. Okay. I fixed that ICMP problem. And it's like, yep, you sure did. Good job, Ned. Right down there. Okay. So there are some rules here. Like I said, the volume's always dismounted. So it's not read-write, it's not read-only. It truly is dismounted. And another secret for all of us here in the room only, we're planning on actually adding some capabilities to have writable copies, read-only copies, test failover copies. Right now it's 1-to-1 per volume. It's not like one-to-many or like I do synchronous from A to B and asynchronous from B to C. That's not there yet. But if you want to do that kind of thing, especially with stuff that already needs protection like Hyper-V and SQL and files, they typically have another kind of replication. It's almost always asynchronous, and you could run that as well. Just point it off to another spot. I can run Hyper-V replica and storage replica together if I wish. I don't have test failover yet, and by yet I mean in the product. It's actually working right now in building 41. And I answered your question there, sir, because you are psychic. Okay, so when do I do sync versus async? That's usually question number one. Async is crash consistent, as is sync, but I don't really have the idea that I can guarantee the writes are happening with async, right? So what I can do, if I'm worried about an individual file with its blocks, not being updated, is I can add volume shadow copy snapshotting, and that replicates, because that's part of the volume and it stores all of its data in the volume, which I'm already replicating. You get it for free. So turn on VSS, say, I don't know, run every 4 hours or whatever, and periodically you will get consistent snapshots of whatever data is on there for whatever writers you have in VSS. The thing about async is you're going to lose data, and that applies to the world of async. Hyper-V replica, DFSR, VMware stuff, EMC stuff. Async means data loss. So when you're thinking about should I do synchronous or asynchronous, the real question is, what's this data worth? What's that worth? This is the only feature I make that could save your job. That's how nice I am to you. Not really. Okay. So the next question is, all right, storage replica, and then I heard a whole bunch of other replication. What do I do about all of them? Well, there's a lot of different workloads, and there's a lot of different kinds of replication. You got Hyper-V replica. It's great for file servers like VMs. It's good for SQL Server. It's good for other applications. Storage replica is good for the very similar set of stuff. It's just a difference of the boundary, right? Hyper-V replica is for a file, a VM, and storage replica is for all the files, a volume. And then if I get down into the next question of, should I still buy SQL? Yeah, because application replication can do things that I can't. I can't be as cool as Hyper-V replica when it comes to using certificates and replicating over HTTP and replicating into Azure Site Recovery's wacky repository thing. And I can't, I don't know what databases are, so all of SQL's cool, always on availability group stuff. I can't do any of that nonsense. So if you want to have a specific application workload replicate, do that. If you want a general storage application product, do me. And then with Exchange, the Exchange guys, somebody went up and asked them if they were going to support storage replica in one of the sessions. And they said, storage what? It's like Exchange is at a different company sometimes. We'll get around to that conversation, but you know from experience that Exchange likes to use DAG, and that's kind of their answer, right? And then you have DFS replication, which is left for things like file replication, and it's still there for sysvol for sure. And then there's Mark Morozinski's favorite product, FRS, which I technically own, and which you should never use, ever. In fact, I made a change. I made a change to FRS, a code change to FRS for a 2016 server. And all it is an event that says, stop running FRS, dumbass. See, I swore there. I wasn't supposed to swear. I'm sorry. We're all adults. Okay, the other over there, if you say, like, what about SAP? Technically, I've been talking to SAP about it, and they're pretty cheerful. But if you next say, what about my application foo and my application bar? Like, I don't know. Put them in touch with me. I want to help your application vendors get on the program here. So can I replace DFSR right now? Is that it? Is DFSR done? Yes. If you want real RPO, you can keep applauding. No, let's keep that going. All right, I can do synchronous replication. I can replicate per volume. Don't care about the secondary copy. I don't care about files being in use. I'm good. If I'm using DFSR because I had to, SR is a great replacement. So the answer is yes, except the answer is also no. Because if I care about file and folder granularity, I cannot help you with storage replica. And if I care about big, complicated, rewrite, multi-master, wacky, hub and spoke topologies, I can't do that with SR. So the answer actually is that. Can I put SR in a VM? Can I put it into Azure? Can I put it into an older operating system? Yes, into a VM, and I don't care. That's great if you don't have Hyper-V. You can use VMware, run Windows Server VMs, replicate them. That's pretty cool. You can put it into Azure. That works great. That's pretty cool. You actually replicate to Azure IaaS if you want, asynchronously. Will we backport this thing? Probably not. It was a ton of work to get this thing going in 2016. And more importantly, I like money. I like it a lot. Consistency groups, if you're a SQL person, you know this phrase, write ordering consistency. We guarantee our log sequence numbers can do write ordering. It's a feature you turn it on and to be supported by SQL or by any database maker, Oracle or MySQL or anybody. They require it, and you can do it with us. It typically hurts performance because what you're doing is really, you're taking all the IOs that used to go to different drives and you're making them sequential, and then you're taking them back out and putting them back down in the order they went out. It's a little painful on performance, but it makes their data guarantees that they want. The log size question that people usually give me is next. By default, it's 8 gig. That's a number just pulled from my butt. There's nothing magic about this number. And the test SR topology tool estimates what your log size might need to be. You saw that, right? For this many days, for this many days, for this many days before it would wrap. So the size really doesn't matter for performance at all. If it's too small, it'll just take longer for you to recover from those outages. And you might see the slightest of periodic hesitations when we wrap the logs and have to generate a new container file. You probably couldn't even notice that. If it's too large, you're just wasting space. And space is pretty important to guys and ladies when they're working on clusters and storage, right? You don't want to waste it on infrastructure stuff. We have performance counters for all of this. So if you got past the phase of caring about test tester topology and you just wanted to look at this thing in an analytic way, there are performance counters for all of it. And those IOs themselves are very interesting. We aggregate IO. This has never been done before inside of normal Windows. When you write your IOs, we stuff them together into a buffer. So if a lot of small IOs show up, we can put them into this buffer, and they all become sequential because we're sequential. So all these little IOs go out in a single IO, which is kind of cool. And they become sequential, which is much faster. If they're bigger, and if they're too big, we'll just spread them across. We take care of all of that for you. We also support seeding. So you can save bandwidth during initial sync, maybe save yourself some time. If you've already got some data out there, even if the drives are empty, if they're totally empty, you could say, oh, they're seeded, and we'll just treat all the 0 blocks as seeded copies. There's not much, there's a fly covering around my face right now. There's not much penalty to this other than higher CPU and memory use. In all my time presenting, ever, I've never been attacked by a fly. That's a new one. It uses more CPU and memory, but really not that much. You're gonna die. If you've previously replicated, we automatically do it. If you've got large copies of data you've already copied out, like robocopy, giant files, those blocks will typically align very well. If you've split mirrors, that will work. If you've replicated to yourself, that will work. Those are all great preceding options. So the next question is usually, okay, that's that 5 milliseconds. How long is that in range? Well, if you went to a basic high school physics class, you would know that it's that long from Einsteinian speed of light. But we're not in outer space right now. So the actual range is usually around half of 1,500 kilometers. And when customers start saying how much money they really want to spend on this, the number is usually around 50 to 100 kilometers max. Now, if you're Mr. Moneybags, like Kenny Lowe over here from Bright Solid, he will make you feel very upset about your network shortly. You can do much further. It's not a question of range, it's a question of latency. Your bandwidth matters. How much data are we writing? You would like some real cheapo napkin math. You're doing around 118 megabytes per second. That's about a gigabit of I/O. So you can use all these tools to figure out what is your latency, what is your bandwidth. I prefer disk speed at the end, but all these other options are there. Traceroute and ping are kind of but at least they'll give you a ballpark figure. And you can constrain it. Remember, we're using SMB. So I will set my SMB bandwidth to whatever I want. Oh, I need extra space for other stuff. Boop, boop, boop. You get to have this much storage replica, not a bit more. Okay, so what isn't storage replica? It's not shared nothing clustering. It's not a backup. I mean, if I delete all your data and then it replicates, that's not an awesome backup solution. Synchronous deletions. Yes, we have reached the promised land. It's not DFSR. So all of those things I said before, what that really boils down to is this thing is not like some general branch office sort of like, robo solution for your users to replace existing file replication technology, okay? And I really do mean that. And when we talk about branch offices and users, I have to return to the Microsoft marketing deck. And here's their view, because this is all millennial time, right? You got the Silicon Valley incubator. That's a typical thing in here, right? You guys are all in Santa Clara? No? No? Okay. What about the Brooklyn sock factory that's now like a startup for making stupid iPhone apps? No? None of you guys here? All right. What about like the Copenhagen Office of Der Future? No? Is it more like maybe like that? I'm fairly sure that's the Microsoft Charlotte office that I used to work in. Okay, so 1 or 2 questions. Anybody have a question? Yes? If the log drive fails on the destination, you can replace it, and we will simply spin the log back up. We'll have to replay everything, but we will be able to do that, yes. What's that? On the source, we would be able to do the same, yes. That would be a fairly catastrophic operation to just lose part of the storage. Typically with JBODs and storage spaces direct and stuff we're using, it's all one giant pool, so it's hard to lose individual parts. But yeah, we can handle that. One more question, because I'm a little bit short on time. Yes, sir.
I believe you indicated earlier that like a CIF share would not be something that you could replicate, even though it may be running SMB3.
So do you mean like use like Samba to replicate stuff, for example?
Right.
Yeah. Samba would need to implement actually using storage replica for that to work.
Okay, and similar to it like a NAS share as well.
Precisely.
Yeah.
If we were yeah, the SMB is just transport. The shares that we create are totally hidden and inaccessible to anybody.
Yeah, the other part of that question is everything you showed was disk mounts. Does it also support directory mounts?
Yes, mount points, absolutely. We do support mount points. And in fact, when you do CSV and stretch cluster, that is what we are replicating.
Okay.
Yes. I'm gonna keep going here, folks. I want you to be able to get to your giant party. Okay, another demo. How do I set this thing up using Failover Cluster Manager? Nice new wizard. The nice wizard does things like prevent you from doing stuff that won't work, rather than letting you get all the way to the end and saying, oh, that didn't work. So I actually get this nice giant page of stuff that nobody will read, and then I pick a volume as a destination, I pick a log as a source, I pick another log as a destination. I'm allowed to actually share these. I can put more and more and more of these things tied to a single log, but in this case I'm being kind of lazy. I can specify synchronous or asynchronous. I can do write ordering here if I was planning on doing that SQL stuff, and I can go. Let's hit cancel and see how fast I can do this. Okay, we're all gonna count now. Enable, next, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, done. Okay, I have now configured replication. That wasn't too bad. If you've ever read the steps, go print the manual for your storage away replication setup. And I guarantee you've murdered at least one redwood. Now you can see here, look at that. I got a progress, not a Microsoft progress, a actual progress. This one's just estimating how much I've done and how much I have to go, and it's like, we're very, very linear. That's the nice thing about, working with underlying storage. Like, there's no like guessing on us. So that's pretty easy to go. I also have Windows PowerShell, if you're into that sort of thing. And I really am. I make fun of Snover and stuff, but I actually love PowerShell, and I find it to be incredibly powerful and easy to use. But really all you need to care about is new SR partnership, set SR partnership, and that topology tool I mentioned before. And that will cover 90% of anything you ever do with this technology. And I can use it to easily tell what's going on, to see state, to see replication information, to see if it's replicating or not, all of it very easily through PowerShell and WMI. And I can set up super easy even with PowerShell. So I will do a new setup with PowerShell with one commandlet, new SR partnership. Is there like a train going by? What is this place? I'm in an aircraft hangar, there's a train, swarms of flies are attacking me. Atlanta's like, it's like being in the Congo right now. It's crazy. All right, so all of this stuff, you can see I'm just picking a drive. I also have the little short aliases here, so if you want to make all this fit into one tweet, it definitely will fit in one tweet. I hit OK, or I press enter, because it's PowerShell, and we look over here, and we can look with all my brand new beautiful performance counters how it's doing. So I'm going to show my little N drive here. And I don't like perfmon, so we made our own little performance counter viewer thingy so you can actually see what it's doing. And you can see here that I'm pushing, I've already done like, 3 gigabytes worth of data. It's just cranking. Here's the rate it's going at right there, cranking up. You can see multi-channel is happening right now because it's using SMB3, so I'm like eating all that pipe. There's no, like with DFSR, you're like, please will you go faster? And with storage replica, you're like, please will you go slower? It's a totally different problem you have now. You can see here, cranking along, and I'm probably going to, at this point, time compress so we don't sit here and wait all day. Actually, it's almost done. Look at the CPU. See the 9 number there? I'm using about 10% the whole time. 10% CPU. Now, how long did this take? 861 seconds. How long is 861 seconds? I don't know. We got calculator back. Yeah! Real calculators back on Windows Server. I just needed an excuse to show it. 14 and a third, so 14 minutes. I did 1.45 terabytes at a 50-kilometer round trip. I was going 50 kilometers in that demo. 1.75 gigabytes per second. That's pretty fast. Okay, why do I keep showing iWarp? I love iWarp. I love Chelsea's stuff. They have awesome performance. They let you use your existing TCP/IP infrastructure. Where's Didier? Where you at, Didier? Sorry, buddy. Didier is Mr. Rocky. You got your Rocky problems? Right there, buddy. Go talk to him. Oh, I forgot to configure DCB and PFC and this, that, and the other. And, that's how he's billing so many hours, because he supports Rocky. No, I'm kidding. Simple setup, price, stable, scalable. I mean, you can believe all my slides here, or you just go back and watch that demo again. I set up Chelsea by plugging 2 cables in, plugging them into a switch, having that switch have some fiber. That was it. That was my whole setup. It took 20 minutes. Of the network, it took 20 minutes. And it's TCP, so it's naturally long haul. You can definitely long haul with InfiniBand, and there's some various options for routing with Rocky and stuff. But with TCP, it's just the simplest one. So, let's talk about some of that. Now, with Storage Replica, the bottom column, there's that 1.45 terabytes, took 14 minutes, 27 seconds. Now, look at the next fastest way I could copy all that data. It would be another extra minute if I robocopied one file that was 1.45 terabytes. That's the best case scenario for robocopy. If we get towards higher and higher and higher, you get to the top, because of the metadata operations of files, it would be far faster for me to copy the entire volume with 95 gig on it. I could do that in 14 minutes, or I could copy the actual files and take 8 hours. There's a different advantage there when you're trying to do data migrations. You can use Storage Replica to push big amounts of data around, not for DR purposes, but just for like, I need this data to go from here to here one time, and then I'll just turn it off and I'm done. And there's another advantage. You saw the CPU before, right? There's Storage Replica, there's Robocopy. Oh wait, let's go to the small files. There's Robocopy. Bam! Robocopy is the natural friend of the stress tester. We also use real hardware for these tests, like Data On. They got a great booth, 2050. Go down to Data On's booth, or go to Dell's booth. That first demo I did was Dell. They make great equipment. We love testing with them. And Data On, we did a simple test. They gave us some equipment. We said, we'll use the old-fashioned, storage space. It's old-fashioned now, right? But like only since Monday. And put classic spaces on there, which the original spaces like kind of sucked, right? Because you had SSDs, but it didn't really use a write tier, and it like ran a little job, and like every few days it was like, oh, I should put some stuff in the cache. And you're like, dude, every few days, come on. So we threw some I/O against it, but now you're putting all your logs into the SSDs, right? So there's without SR, that's IOPS, so bigger's better. Just a second, I'll go back. With SR, it's faster. Because I'm channeling everything through the SSDs. I'm guaranteeing it's going through the SSDs on old storage spaces shared. What about throughput? Bigger's better, right? Faster with storage replica? Again, I'm using SSDs. Now, this is not going to be the normal behavior, right? I mean, storage replication and synchronous replication is not going to make your stuff faster in general. But if you're using something which couldn't really properly cache and tier before, we are effectively becoming a tier, a cache for writes. Look at the latency. I messed up my little slide. It's 188 at the bottom, down to 16 with SR. Because I made everything sequential, I made everything serialized, I aggregated all those IOs, and I went through a log on SSDs. It's pretty impressive. At 80 kilometers. Or you can look at it from like a nice, I like columns. Bigger columns are better. Smaller columns are better. Bigger columns are better. But we didn't stop there. We said, all right, we can make replication. We are at least 20 years late to this party. And all the EMC guys are going to laugh at us because, they started off this nonsense back in like the early 90s. So we got to make sure that we bring the right set of features that most customers want. We spent a lot of time interviewing customers and talking with them, and we put in the right set that we thought would meet their requirements. The first one was you can specify which networks to use at all times. I want to use this network, not that network. I want to use this network, not that network. I can grow my volumes while they're being replicated. I have thin provisioning support. I can delegate administration so that Phil the donkey is only an administrator of replication and nothing else. He's not even an administrator on the server. He's just a replication administrator. What do I mean by thin provisioning? Thin provisioning, you know about it, it's been around forever. The storage basically allocates blocks, and any blocks that aren't allocated just get counted as already being taken care of, right? So I set up here, I just set up replication. You can see there's very little CPU happened. Most of that CPU is actually me logging back and forth between these machines and making the graphics bump a little bit. If I look in that event log, it took 0 seconds to set up replication. Probably took a little bit more than 0 seconds, probably took some portion of a second, but we rounded it down to 0 for you. That replication went over thin provision storage. There was no data on it, so I set up replication and it's instantly done because there's nothing to replicate. If I do the exact same thing all over again here on the same storage and I don't have it set to thin, that same thing would have taken me 96 seconds. So I went from 96 seconds down to no seconds, a ratio of infinitely better. Now, how do I convince people to use this thing? I mean, I've already convinced you, I'm sure, like a used car salesman. I play this little game called D6DR. If you ever played Dungeons and Dragons, you roll D6, D20, etc. for stuff. I start with a 6-sided die, or you can use one of those little web pages that'll do a little dice rolling animation for you if you're so inclined. And I say, first off, Mr. Customer, just quickly take your main data center and just sort up on the whiteboard, okay? Like where's the racks, where's the power, where's the cooling, where's the fire suppression, where's all the switches and gear? And if you want some real extra credit, what's running inside of those racks and where? And that's where they're all gonna say like, but 60 minutes at most. And you just draw it on the whiteboard. You don't need to like pull out blueprints or anything. And then just divide it by 6. See that, the 6 little sections? Okay, we'll roll the die. That part's gone now. Flood, water pipe broke. If you want some fun, go look at water pipe broke data center on YouTube. And you'll see guys like with buckets in their data centers trying to, I don't know what they think they're doing, it's too late, man. So that section's just gone. So what happened, like what was in that section? You might have to go look right now at that point because they may not even know what's in that section. What did you lose? How quickly can I get it back? Can I get it back? Is it even backed up? What happens if that section was to be turned off right now and not be coming back for 3 weeks before I could get my server manufacturers to send me some new machines? You can make this into a drill. It's fun to spring on people. They really like that. If you're a boss in here, you can really cheer up your staff by doing this kind of stuff. And it can be a lot of fun, actually. It's also terrifying the first time you do it. The second time you do it, after you've learned your lessons, everybody's high-fiving and stuff, okay? And that's where Storage Replica fits, to try and keep you protected throughout the data center. Now, I want to take 3 minutes here and have Kenny come up on stage. Kenny Lowe is from Bright Solid. They are a massively interesting company in Scotland that he's going to talk about right now. And then we'll come back to me after that.
Okay, do I click or do you click, or is there anything else?
You're going to want that.
Yeah. Okay, I find myself now as a Scotsman as the sort of the person that's between you and beer at this party, and that doesn't sit that naturally, so I'll be as quick. So, for those of you that don't know, Scotland's this small country just north of England. It's about the size of the Georgia World Congress Centre. We own and operate our own Tier 3 data centers there, and because we used to be an internet service provider, we have this great strong network backbone. We have multiple 10 gig pipes between our data centers. We actually have the hardware on site for 100 gigabit connectivity between. It's the telcos letting us down there just now. It's always the telcos. We'll get there. So we primarily serve the energy, public, and finance sectors just now. These are people that really care about security and data assurance. So we've worked closely with guys like Ned and with Dean Wells on VM shielding, on Storage Replica, to make sure that at GA of 2016, we as a hoster can start delivering these benefits to our customers. So you can see from the slide here that our latency between sites, pretty good, sub-millisecond between our Dundee and Aberdeen data center. It's a prime candidate for SR. It's about 57 miles between Dundee and Aberdeen. That's about 92 million millimeters, I think, off the top of my head. So what we really want to give to our customers is fair value above all else. So what we try and do wherever we can is bring our prices down, bring down the cost of our infrastructure so that we can deliver more value into the customer there. That's the true value of low-cost infrastructure. So what this really allows us to do is get rid of several different replication technologies that have RPOs in the region of about 15 minutes typically, and move to something that's just built into the product. There's no extra cost here. It's in Windows Server 2016 Data Center, so we can just start using it, save money. We add in extra features and capabilities to our customers then. For example, we've announced this week that when we bring VM shielding, first in the world to market in the next few weeks, we're not going to charge any more for a shielded VM than versus a normal VM. So we do that. We're able to do that because features like Storage Replica bring down the overall cost of the infrastructure and let us bring more value. So it's a great story, we think, and I guess that's all from me.
Thanks, Kenny. I don't speak Scottish. I don't understand a word he said. No, thanks, Kenny. Okay. We have other people who will gladly tell you how wonderful we are, like Dan Weisenborn from ClearPoint. In their case, they were able to finally just say, that was the missing piece. That's how I can finally get rid of my SAN. That was the thing that Windows was missing. And we think this kind of closes that loop. So the real question is, forget about the list, the brochure, what do I actually need to accomplish and what are my actual problems? Well, I could lose my data center, my cluster, or even just individual servers and really be in a heap of trouble. What do I need to make that not happen? I need it to be inexpensive. I don't want to see a big impact on my life. I want it to be reliable, and I want it to be easy to use. We think the Storage Replica and 2016 server brings all of those aspects to you. All of these sessions here that we've done all week are now available on YouTube. This one will be up there in a few minutes. If you go to the YouTube and look for the Microsoft Ignite channel, if you were like caught up in the moment on your phone, or you missed a session because there were 14 at once, we've got you all covered on here. All of these things are there. And of course, you can always contact us. Now, I have one last chance for questions here. And then remember not to go running off. A lot of people have already run off, because if you stick around, the good folks from Sticker Mule have you covered for your laptop. So, what questions do we have left? Yes, sir. Can somebody forward his question to me? I can't hear him. What's that? Is deduplication included? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that that actually happens in the volume right now, which is like, sky miles above me. You can definitely dedupe and replicate that data, and it will be deduped on the other end. Build it into us, like deduping blocks is actually something we're interested in looking at right now. We did look at this intern who came for a few months, and we were like, I don't know what to do with this guy. And we said, hey, go make compression in Storage Replica. And he's like, what? He was like, what's Windows Server? Was the first thing he said, because he's some intern from MIT. So we explained the Windows Server real quick, and he's like, oh, I get it. It's like my phone, but really big. Anybody in here who's under 25, you're dead to me. Okay, so he looked around, he found some amazing Microsoft Research compression stuff that we had just been sitting on and not telling anybody about, and he built compression into Storage Replica as a prototype where we were knocking 80% off what we were using on the wire and getting only like 5% extra CPU, like amazing stuff. So those kinds of things that we are working on, yes sir. Another question? Can't be. Yes. I'm sorry, what? Is it ready to use or preview? As of Monday morning, you can download this from the Windows Server Eval Center. You can go get it as of 6 a.m. on Monday. Just look for Windows Server 2016. It will be generally available. That is to say, right now, if you have a volume license, you can just go talk to your VL person and say, give me my media. What are you waiting for? If you have a retail license or non-agreement with us, you can download it, and the availability of the keys and everything will be in 2 weeks, October 9th. If you install it right now, you'll get this, so we don't call them service packs anymore, right? Cumulative update. So you'll get this cumulative update, this hotfix, which is like 850 megabytes, and then you have basically patched it to a GA level, and everything we knew about before we shipped it is now fixed, and you're in business. I think I have time for one more question here. Yes, sir. Is that mic working over on the right?
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. On the destination volume, are you allowed to take volume shadow copies?
On the destination, no. On the source, yes. And what you will do is, once those volume shadow copies are created, they get put into the system volume information folder, and they replicate along. And if you actually have your disaster where you wanted to, and you lost your source and you need to do something about those, you can mount the destination, whether or not the old one is there or not, if it's dead, alive, or whatever, and then use that snapshot to restore data or just recover the entire volume itself. Yes. Okay, there's some stuff about stuff, and I'm sure it's very important. And I'm sure they want you to do this. What I want you to do is A, go enjoy yourself tonight and stop thinking about all this and promise me you won't talk about work for the next 3 hours. And B, come on up here, get yourself a sticker, and thank you very much for your time.